The Gospels are filled with a lot of preaching and a lot of parables. However, we're not going to look at those. We're going to look at the actual events that supposedly take place in the Gospels. Now, before we start this, I'm going to point out a few recurring themes and a few patterns that you'll notice throughout the rest of the video. For one, there's a lot of contradictions between the different accounts of the Gospels. Other times, an event in one Gospel isn't even backed up by the other Gospels. Now, outside the Gospels, we find that, of course, there's almost no historical documents describing the events that supposedly took place. Some of these events in the Gospels are so huge that you'd expect someone to actually mention it outside the Gospels. However, that never happens. Another thing that I will point out is when a Gospel writer is obviously trying to give the appearance of a fulfilled prophecy, but also fails at it, being that the event is either inconsistent with the other Gospels or not backed up by historical evidence. So, now that I've explained all this, let's get to those Gospels. So first of all, we have Jesus' genealogy. There are two versions of this, one in Matt chapter 1, the other in Luke chapter 3. If you read these, you'll find that they are completely contradictory. The common fundamentalist response to this is that one describes Mary's lineage, the other describes Joseph's lineage. But if we were to actually read the Bible, both claim that they are describing Jesus' lineage from Joseph. Now, if the Gospel writers didn't know for sure what Jesus' genealogy was, why did they even write it down? Well, because there's a prophecy that says Jesus should be descended from David. So, the Gospel writer, without any genealogy for Jesus or any evidence of Jesus' relationship to David, he decided to invent one. Now, it's possible that one Gospel writer had the correct genealogy and the other didn't, but that still means one is wrong, and that particular one is willing to completely fabricate something to give the appearance of a fulfilled prophecy. It should also be noted that neither the Gospel of John or the Gospel of Mark try to back up either Luke or Matt on this particular subject. Next in line, the virgin birth. Again, this is a subject mentioned only in the Gospel of Matt and Luke, so the Gospel of John and Mark don't back this up. But even if they did, this event is still physically impossible. In our day and age, we know that such things do not happen. However, back then, people were much more likely to believe it, being that they believed in supernatural events. What should also be noted is that this event is supposed to be fulfilling a prophecy. However, in the prophecy that it cites, most historians and linguists agree that the word used is not virgin, but instead young woman. So in this case, we find that instead of actually fulfilling the prophecy that was written down, the Gospel writers try to give the appearance of their interpretation of the prophecy being fulfilled. Does that sound like the Gospel writers are trying to fabricate an event to you? It does so to me. Event number 3, Jesus goes to Egypt. Unfortunately, this event is only mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew. The other 3 Gospels decide not to back Matthew up on this. And as far as details go, the entire trip is summed up into 2 or 3 verses, and the entire trip back is summed up in another 2 or 3 verses. Details of this event are surprisingly lacking. Now, what we have is an event with almost no details that is not backed up by the other 3 Gospels. Why is Matthew even mentioning this thing? Well, instead of interpreting the book of Hosea chapter 11 verse 1 as a reference to the Exodus, the Gospel writer who wrote Matthew decided to instead interpret that as a prophecy about Jesus. So, he decided to fabricate an event to make it look like Jesus fulfilled a prophecy. The 4th event that we're going to look at is known as the Massacre of the Innocents. It is described only in the Gospel of Matthew and not backed up in any way, shape, or form by the other 3 Gospels. According to the Gospel of Matthew, Herod, the Roman governor of that part of the Roman Empire at that time, is supposedly so distressed by Jesus' birth that he goes to Bethlehem and kills every infant in the town to try to get rid of Jesus. Neither Herod, any of his commanders, or any historian make any mention of this in their journals or in their writings. Due to there being no evidence of it, most historians think that this event never took place. So, with no evidence of this event taking place, and not being backed up by the other 3 Gospels, why did Matthew mention this event too? Well, would you be surprised to hear that there's a prophecy for this one? That's right, another fabricated event to give the appearance of another fulfilled prophecy. The fifth thing that I'm going to talk about is not limited to only one event. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus supposedly heals many people of their sicknesses. This actually does occur in all four Gospels. Many mythologies have this idea of a prophet or a man of God healing the sick. The Gospels aren't alone in this. The fact still remains that the healing of the sick simply by touching them or praying about them has never been known to heal them. This event can simply be disregarded on the grounds that it is physically impossible. But the fact that it is physically impossible set aside, there's still the idea that there's a man walking around Israel who can heal the blind and the sick, and this does not get written down anywhere. The only reference we have to this would be these Gospels that were written decades after the events they described, so you'd expect various sources to be documenting this. You'd expect many contemporaneous individuals to write down that they saw a man heal the sick by touching them. However, that does not exist anywhere with the Jesus story. These are some events that are not backed up by history in any way. So you know what? Looking at the prophecies that say heal the sick, and looking at the way that the gospel writers are more than willing to lie to make their gospels look like they're more mythical and more divinely inspired, I'd say that this is most likely also fabricated. The sixth thing that we're going to look at is the Sadducees and the Pharisees. These are two groups of people that throughout the Gospels contested Jesus and saying, hey, perform miracles for us. And yet, Jesus was surprisingly incapable of doing so when he was in front of these individuals. Now, we wouldn't expect the Sadducees and the Pharisees to write down and document a man that they believe is just another crazy man who believes he talks to God. But it's interesting because at some parts of the Gospels, you have Jesus perfectly willing to grant the wishes of people who come to him and to heal them and to perform miracles. And yet, at the same time, when these groups of people come up to him, he does not. It's something worth mentioning and looking at simply because it's just so strange. Number 8. Jesus rides to Jerusalem on a donkey. This is mentioned in the Gospels of Matt, Mark, and Luke, and it's supposed to be the fulfillment of a prophecy. Given how well the other prophecy fulfillments went, I think we can guess how this is going to go. The accounts given in the three Gospels do contradict each other. Luke does not mention where the donkey is found. However, Mark says that the donkey is found where two ways meet. That would be an intersection. And Matthew says that the animals, in Matthew there are two animals, which would be a major contradiction, are found in a straight way. Now, the actual prophecy says, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So in this case, we find that the three Gospels try to fulfill a prophecy. However, when you have three people independently fabricating an event, their descriptions are going to be quite different. We'd expect that. Number 9. Here's another noteworthy event that should be mentioned. Jesus gets tempted by the devil. In this story, the devil cites a prophecy saying, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. That prophecy being in Psalm chapter 91, verses 11 and 12. Jesus then cites Deuteronomy saying that you cannot test your God. However, the devil still cited a legitimate prophecy, and Jesus did not fulfill that prophecy. So even though it might be sugar-coated in a way that Jesus says, oh, you can't test me, oh, you're the devil, or something to that effect, there's still the fact that it's a prophecy, and Jesus refused to fulfill it.